Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another video. This one we're going to do something a bit different from the last video. We're actually going to do a archetypal discussion on some new support that has came out from Eternity Code. This is the Senka archetype. So this is the new Fire Fist meets Six Samurai deck that revolves around continuous spell cards and their own monsters using their effects and contending with each other to control and lock your opponent out of doing any big plays. The Senka archetype is first coming out in Ignition Assault with 6 monsters and 3 spells and traps. And then it's releasing some further support in Eternity Code. But what I'll do first is I'll talk about what is already coming out in the OCG and what we're hopefully getting here in January. And then we'll go through the card by card about what's coming out in the next set to discuss what way the deck's going to go further down the road, whether it's going to be a big top tier contender or whether it's just going to be another archetype that just gets pushed to the wayside by something like maybe more Sky Striker or more Orcust or more Thunder Dragon support. So first up, we're going to look at the monsters. So first we have Senka Champion Zhang Di. All these cards are based off characters from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and they are all beast warriors with usually an effect that requires one of 2 conditions, but this is one here that is kind of a bit simple and to the point. Senka Champion Zhang Di, Beast Warrior, Wind, level 7, 2700, 900 defense. Gains 300 attack for each monster your opponent controls during your turn only. If you control 2 or more Senka monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. And if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can activate this effect. This card can make up to 2 attacks during each battle phase per turn. You can only use each of the following those following effects once per turn. This is an okay card. It does put a big body on the board, and if you're pushing for that end-game win, this card will win the game for you, being able to attack 2 monsters, possibly in attack position, or just clear your opponent's board outright for that final push. Overall, this card is good. I would say whenever the new support comes out, maybe run 2 of it. Maybe 1, depending on the ratios and stuff like that, or how good the other support gels well with the other support. But at this stage, we can't really tell how good Zhang Di is going to be, but it is a good offensive creature. Next up, we have Senka Justice Guan Yun. Monster, Beast Warrior, Wind, 2500 attack, 1800 defense, level 7 monster. If only your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon this card from your hand, so similar to Cyber Dragons. And if your opponent tries to use a target effect on one of your other Senka monsters, it has to target it instead. And if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can target a monster they control and destroy it. Overall, this is a much better Cyber Dragon in terms of base monster format. Now, obviously, Cyber Dragons have all that legacy support and getting into the big creatures and stuff like that from the extra deck. But if you were to compare this monster to Cyber Dragon, this one would just win hands down. It's not only a bigger body, but it has also got the ability to protect its own allies on the board and also destroy cards on the board. So overall, it's a solid card. I would say if you could run 3 of it, especially if you're going to build a going second build. But yep, next up we have Senka Intermediary San Mao. Beast Warrior, Water, 1800, 1500, level 4. What we've noticed with a lot of these cards coming out is they're all going to be different attributes based off what faction in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms that they belong to. So the first 2 were belonging to I believe the Shu faction, and this one is based off the Wu faction. So while you control another Senka monster, your opponent cannot target this card for attacks, and you can only use the following effects once per turn. You can send 1 card from your hand to the field, or hand or field to the graveyard. Add 1 Senka monster from deck to hand, and its other effect is if your other Senka monster's effect is activated, except during the damage step, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls, return it to the hand. So one of the key themes with this deck is that if you would activate another Senka monster's effect, another effect would activate in tandem with it. This is only seen in a few of the cards, not all of them, but it seems to have 2 or 3 different mechanics, and this is one of them. The other one being if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, then you activate another effect. So it seems to be like the leaders of the factions have this. If another Senka monster would activate an effect, do this. Whereas the bigger monsters seem to have if your opponent controls more monsters than you do this type of thing. Overall, this card's good. It can search a Senka monster. It's a Rhoda. And as you'll see with some of the later support, sending stuff to the graveyard actually has additional effects on top of that. So overall, it's a good card and it has a good synergy with what's already out on the board. Next up, we have Zenka Adonis Zhugong. It is a Beast Warrior Water level 4, 1600, both attack and defense. You can target one continuous spell or trap card you control, send to the grave, and if you do, add a Senka spell or trap directly from your deck to your hand. If another Senka monster's effect is activated, you can target one effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effects. You can only activate each effect once per turn. This is again another great utility card, allows you to search your Senka spells and traps, and as I said later on, some of the Senka cards will have additional effects when they're sent to the graveyard. But overall, good solid card, good if you need to try and get into some of the continuous spells to get access to that. Next up we have Senka Nobel Louis Schwan. Beast Warrior Wind, 1400 attack, 1200 defense, level 4. While you control another Senka monster, your opponent cannot target this card for attacks. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can send one card from your hand or field to the graveyard, special summon a Senka monster from the deck. And while an attack is declared involving another Senka monster, you can draw one card. Louis Schwan is one of the cards I will say you will definitely want to run 3 of. It's not the easiest card to find, although especially with the fire formations, it will make this card a lot easier to get out on your first turn. However, this is one of the few cards I would say you will definitely, no matter which build you're going to go for, you're going to run the 3 of. And overall, it's a solid card, a good special summon from the deck, and also a draw engine as well. It's solid. Senka Tactician Lu Jing. Beast Warrior, Warrior, level 4, 700 attack, 2000 defense. You can target one continuous spell or trap card you control, send to the grave. Add from your graveyard to your hand one Senka spell or trap card with a different name from the sent card. If another Senka monster's effect is activated, you can target one spell or trap card your opponent controls, destroy it. Good solid graveyard recursion. I don't know if you would want to run 3 of it. But overall, it's, again, a nice, good, solid card. No way to special summon itself like the other level 4 seem to have, but it seems to be the way they're doing it. The lower level monsters don't have a special summoning mechanic, while the bigger monsters have a way of getting themselves special summoned if the conditions are met. Moving on to the first wave of support for the spells and traps, we have Senka Legend the 3 Visit. Send this card to the graveyard during your second standby phase after activation. During your main phase, if you normal or special summon a Senka monster, you can target one of those monsters. Add from your deck to your hand one Senka monster with a different name from that target. If this card is sent from your spell and trap zone to the graveyard, you can special summon a Senka monster from your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. This is the one you will run 3 of no matter what. Not only does it search out all of your Senka monsters, depending on which one you summon, but it'll also allow you to get a free special summon should you combine it with, say, Senka Ardonis' effect, add a Senka monster spell or trap from your hand, or Senka Tactician, or even better, Senka Intermediary, to add that Senka monster to your hand, then use the effect to special summon it directly from your hand onto the field. This is a great card, and it has great utility. The second standby phase activation ability, I think, is fair. Having this constantly out on the board would essentially allow a lot of degenerate combos, I think, and to have that second standby activation clause, I think, is a fair and balanced way of making the card fair. Senka Legend, the Sun Lue Alliance. If you control 2 or more Senka monsters with different attributes, you can declare one attribute monsters your opponent controls with that attribute cannot activate their effects until the end of his turn. If your opponent special summons a monster, if you activate a Senka monster's effect, except during the damage step, you can make all Senka monsters you currently control gain 300 for each monster you control until the end of the turn. You can only use each effect once per turn. A solid card. I wouldn't run more than 2 of these in the deck. Maybe just the one. This is your win condition. If all else fails and your opponent has no creatures on the board, you can just swing for big game. Or it'll help protect your monsters should your opponent special summon a monster or give them a big buff, prevent them from being attacked and stuff like that. Overall, it's okay. It's not going to be winning any games by itself. It does require a lot of setup to do it, but overall, it's solid for what the archetype has and what it needs. And then finally, we have the first continuous trap card of the archetype, Senka Legend, Champions Bravery at Qingbang Bridge. If your Senka monster battles your opponent can activate spells or traps until the end of the damage step. Essentially making all of your monsters Utopia the Lightnings. Good solid first effect. However, you can only use each of the other following effects once per turn. Start of the battle phase, you can send this card face up from your spell trap zone to the graveyard. Your opponent cannot target Senka monsters for attack this turn, and then when your opponent's monster declares an attack, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon one Senka monster from your deck. Great card. The fact it's on a trap card is a wee bit disappointing. I would have loved if this had been a continuous spell card, but I can see why it's a continuous trap card. Again, it's this whole balancing issue that they're trying to make it that these cards don't have the swarming capability that Six Samurai used to have, but at the same time, give them that push where they can be somewhat viable in any scenario, and also have the Fire Fist capability of swarming a lot of monsters onto the board and using their effects. So with that initial wave of support, you can tell the deck has a lot of potential to be great. However, it is missing a few key pieces, mainly things for protection. It doesn't have a lot of recurability with the graveyard, and it's very heavily reliant on the initial first swarm and protecting those creatures with that. However, with Eternity Code, Konami has given us a few extra cards to play with and introduced the third faction into the archetype. First off, we have Senka Chief Sao De, a 3,2500 level 8 fire beast warrior effect monster, and it can only use its first and third effects once per turn. If a card your opponent controls is destroyed by battle or card effect, send one other card you control or from your hand to the graveyard, special summon this card from your hand. This card cannot be targeted or destroyed by an opponent's card effect while you control another Senka monster. And when this card destroys an opponent's monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard, you can special summon it to your field in defense position. This card doesn't fix the problems with the archetype, layering by the swarming effect and all that sort of stuff. However, what this card does do is it gives it a bit of extra utility when dealing with certain archetypes. So for example, when you destroy troublesome cards and send them to the graveyard, you can instead steal them, use them, possibly do link climbing, XE summon, synchro summon, depending on what the major mechanic of this deck is. I don't feel this deck will have a major extra deck mechanic. I think it will mainly be a main deck only archetype. However, it will allow you to steal your opponent's monsters, use them to go in the XZs, links, all that sort of stuff. Overall, it's a good solid card, and the way to special summon it isn't really that hard in the archetype, especially with cards like Guan Yun and the Spell and Trap card destruction. And it does seem to be this is the de facto boss monster of the archetype until we see something maybe from the extra deck. But overall, it's a good solid card, and it's something to push the deck in the right direction. Up next is Senka Herald Zhan Yuan. Fire Beast Effect Warrior, level 6, 2300 attack, 2000 defense. Again, you can only use this card's name's first and third effects once per turn each. At the beginning of the damage step, when a Senka monster you control battles an opponent's face-up monster, special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, that opponent's monster loses 1000 attack. Senka monsters you control cannot be destroyed by battle except this card, and if an opponent's monster is destroyed by battle, or an opponent's card, is destroyed by battle or card effect, target a card your opponent controls, destroy it. This is what the deck needed. Another way to special summon monsters, another way to protect your creatures, and also a way of removal that the deck really needed, and again utilizes the cards that may already have with the swarming effect. So overall, this is a card I could see there being 3 of being run. The only thing is this does create a soft lock if there's 2 of these out on the board. So if you have 2 of these guys out in the board in defense position, none of your Senka monsters can be destroyed by battle. Same way with Guan Yun, if 2 of those are out on the board, your opponent cannot target them with card effects. Overall, this is a card I definitely see 3 of being run in all builds. And overall, it's a solid monster for the archetype. Next up is the third of the faction that is now being released in this set. It is Senka Machinator Jian Wen, Fire Beast Warrior effect, level 4, 1100 attack, 1800 defense. You can only use this card's first and second effect once per turn. You can target one continuous spell you control, send it to the grave, and if you do, half the attack of 2 face-up monsters until the end of his turn. And if an opponent's card is destroyed by battle or card effect, target a Senka card in your graveyard, accept itself, and add it to your hand. This is your graveyard recursion. The fact that if a card is destroyed by battle or card effect your opponent controls, you can add something to your hand, is a wee bit slow. I would have preferred it if it had been send a continuous spell or trap to the graveyard. Again, add a Senka card from graveyard to hand. But the fact that it has this ability, at least it has that wee bit of graveyard recursion. I can only see there being 1 or 2 of these being run. There is no way to special summon this card from the hand. Or the special summon itself from the hand. So overall, it's a card I would see there being 1 or 2 of. But it's still solid for the whole adding stuff to your graveyard to your hand. The fourth and final monster that has been spoiled so far, Senka Strategist Shuge Kong. Wind Beast Warrior effect, level 4, 1000 attack, 2000 defense. You can only use each of this card's effects once per turn each. If this card is added from your deck to your hand by a Senka card effect, special summon this card. When a card effect is activated that is spell or trap, send one face-up Senka continuous spell or trap you control the graveyard, negate the activation. And when a monster effect is activated and you control Senka Noble Louis Schwan, that is the special summon from the deck, Senka Noble, you can send one face-up Senka continuous spell or trap you control the graveyard, negate the activation. This is the protection the deck really needed. The fact that it's all in one card is a wee bit concerning. So it's pretty much going to be protect this card and your Louis Schwan to keep them alive. But the fact that it can negate any monster or spell or trap card if the two cards are out in the field by just sending a continuous spell or trap is a great card. And also, because of some of the ways these cards work in tandem with each other, sending the continuous spells or traps actually is a benefit to you as well because you get to add more to your board presence. So overall, it's a great card. I don't see this deck winning with just this, but we've got one more continuous spell left to talk about, and it is Senka Legend 100,000 Arrows. You can target one face-up monster your opponent controls and one Senka monster you control till the end of this turn. Half that monster attack, and if you do that, your monster gains that attack. If this card is sent to the graveyard and you control two or more attributes of Senka monsters you control, you can place one Senka continuous spell or trap directly from your hand or deck face-up on your field, except itself. This card, its graveyard effect, absolutely brilliant. The fact it gets to replace itself in tandem with everybody else using their own effects means that you're not losing resources or you're not equalizing your resources. You're actually +1ing off this. The first effect of having your opponent's attack and gaining that much attack can come in handy with dealing with the big boss monsters that are seeing more prevalent play in Yu-Gi-Oh! Nowadays. But overall, it's not going to see that much play. I can see this being more of like a placeholder so that the opponents can use their effects and gain a lot of advantage. So with that, that's the deck. Overall, the deck has a lot of good solid support. Will it see meta play? I don't know. It all depends on how it factors against other plays. Currently on the screen, as you can see, is my current build with what's currently been released. It runs three of basically all the Senka monsters and a load of hand traps, and then the two fire formations, Tensu and Tenki, to add and do the additional normal summon, which the deck kind of needs to do. Three of the Searcher continuous spell, one of the Buffer, one of the continuous trap card, and three evenly matched. This is just the white board, so if I'm going second, I need to get rid of a lot of troublesome cards. Overall, I think this deck is a solid tier 2 contender. If the deck works the way I hope it would, I could see it pushing possibly to tier 1.5, depending on what other decks are going to be currently floating in the meta. But overall, the deck has a great start, and I hope they continue to make continuous support for it. Hopefully, once the rest of the cards are revealed or put onto Yu-Gi-Oh! Pro, I'll be able to show you a few play-by-plays and show you how the deck should operate, and hopefully a good solid build for anybody wishing to take up the deck. But overall, guys, that's my video. Give us a like, a subscribe, a follow, whatever you feel like. If there's anything you feel like I've missed in the video, please leave it in the comments. I'll try and maybe make a follow-up video. If there's enough, if I've missed enough, I'll make a follow-up video. And enjoy the rest of your day, guys, and I hope to see you again soon.